Amber Heard made one move during her battle with Johnny Depp that changed everything, and not in the way she expected. It was not the accusations or the headlines that hurt her case the most. It was a single decision that left her own words and actions exposed in front of the world. Millions watched as the truth came out through recordings, court testimony, and evidence that could not be ignored. What she thought would protect her image ended up doing the opposite, and the audience saw it all unfold in real time. This is the story of that mistake and how it shaped the outcome. The decision that cost Amber Heard the most was not just one outburst or one argument, it was the choice to put her version of events into the public eye through that Washington Post op-ed in December 2018, while private recordings and messages already existed that would later be played in open court for the world to hear. She described herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse and spoke of facing the culture's wrath for women who speak out, yet she never named Johnny Depp in the piece. The jury in Fairfax County, Virginia still found those statements defamed him with actual malice because the timing and the context made the connection clear. That single published piece became the foundation of the lawsuit. That brought every recording, every photo, and every inconsistency into the light for millions watching the trial live. What made the choice so damaging was that the evidence of her own words was already there waiting in one audio played in court. She can be heard telling Johnny, "Tell the world, Johnny, tell them I, Johnny Depp, a man I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and see how many people believe or side with you." The recording captured her tone and the challenge she issued, knowing full well how the public might react, yet she still moved forward with the narrative that painted only one side. When those same tapes were introduced during the trial, the jury heard her admit, "I did start a physical fight," and in another exchange, she said, "I was hitting you, I was not punching you, I did not punch you, I was hitting you." The words were her own, recorded in private moments that she never expected would reach a courtroom full of strangers and cameras. The more the recordings played, the harder it became to maintain the image she had built, because the jury was not relying on secondhand stories. They were listening to the actual voices, the actual arguments, and the actual admissions that shifted the entire weight of credibility. Another moment that sealed the impact of her decision came when photos and testimony about the so-called dog incident were shown. The image of what was left on the bed was presented, and the jury had to consider the context of the relationship that had already been described in such heated private conversations. Her own friends and staff gave accounts that sometimes lined up with the timeline of events and sometimes raised new questions about what really happened on specific nights. The Australian trip where Johnny's fingertip was injured became another flashpoint with competing stories, yet the medical records and the texts from that period were examined under oath, and the jury had to weigh whose version held up under the pressure of cross-examination. Every time a new piece of evidence was introduced, it circled back to the original choice of publishing that op-ed, because without that public statement, the private recordings might never have been forced into the open. The trial lasted weeks, and every day brought fresh details, from the couple's marriage counselor who spoke of mutual conflict to the security staff who described late-night arrivals and departures. The volume of material was enormous. Yet the core problem remained the same: her own recorded voice admitting to physical actions and then challenging him to go public created a contradiction that no amount of later explanation could fully erase. When she took the stand, the cross-examination returned again and again to those same tapes, and the jury watched her react in real time. The smirk that some observers noted during certain playbacks, the pauses, the shifts in tone, all of it was part of the public record now, and it reinforced the sense that the original decision to speak in print without accounting for the existence of those recordings had been a miscalculation of enormous scale. The jury's verdict on June 1, 2022 confirmed the damage. They found her liable on all three counts related to the op-ed statements and awarded Johnny $10 million in compensatory damages plus punitive damages that were later reduced under Virginia law, while she received $2 million on one counterclaim. The net result was a clear rejection of the narrative she had advanced and a public affirmation that the evidence of her own words had outweighed the claims she made. The recordings had been made years earlier during the marriage, yet they only became decisive once the op-ed forced the legal battle into the open. That is why the mistake was so complete. She created the very stage on which her private admissions would be heard by the world, and once the jury listened, there was no way to take the words back. The public reaction followed the evidence. People who had once accepted the initial headlines began questioning the full picture as the trial footage spread and the audio clips circulated. The shift was visible in real time because the material was not filtered through second-hand reports. It was the original voices and the original context that changed minds. The choice to go public with a carefully worded piece while those recordings existed turned out to be the pivot point that allowed every other detail to surface, and once that door opened, the rest of the story could no longer be controlled. The trial transcripts remain available, the audio exhibits were played in open court, and the verdict stands as the legal conclusion of what those materials showed. The decision that seemed powerful at the time of publication became the reason the full record was examined and the reason the jury reached the conclusion it did. Every subsequent moment of the case returned to that original step, and the weight of her own recorded statements proved heavier than any later explanation could lift. The more the public heard the actual exchanges, the clearer the gap between the published image and the private reality became, and That gap was created by the very act of publishing without accounting for what already existed on tape. The mistake was not simply speaking, it was speaking in a way that invited the complete record into the light and then discovering that the complete record did not support the version that had been presented. The jury's finding of actual malice meant they believed she knew or should have known the statements were false, and that finding rested on the mountain of material that the lawsuit itself brought forward. Without the op-ed, the private moments might have stayed private. With it, they became the center of one of the most closely watched civil trials in recent memory, and the outcome reflected exactly what those moments contained: the recordings of her admitting physical contact, the challenge to him to claim victimhood, the contradictions in timelines, and the physical evidence presented. All of it flowed from that single public choice, and once the choice was made, there was no retreat. The story that audiences connected with was not a polished narrative, it was the raw unfolding of evidence in real time, the honest reactions of people watching the tapes, the simple fact that her own voice carried more weight than any later framing, and that is why the decision stands as the turning point that shaped everything that followed. The legal system examined the full context, the public saw the unfiltered material, and the verdict confirmed that the private record had spoken louder than the published one. The cost of that mistake was measured not only in the damages awarded but in the permanent shift of public perception that followed the presentation of the evidence itself. The evidence from the Fairfax County trial and the recordings played in open court leave little room for doubt about how that single public choice reshaped everything that followed. Now that you have heard the full story of the decision and the consequences that came with it, I want to know what stands out most to you. Was it the audio admissions, the jury's finding of actual malice, or the way the private record overtook the published narrative? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this with anyone still piecing together what really happened. If this breakdown helped clarify the timeline, hit the like button and stay tuned for more clear, honest looks at the cases that continue to matter.